This is the Pylon Dons Fantasy Football Podcast. Sorry, AJ just woke up from a nap, so I had to go really quiet. I appreciate him being here today. I'm sure he was dreaming about me just putting him in a mix or an argument arena. So I'm happy he's here. Today we're going to be talking about quarterbacks and tight ends of the rookie variety. But before we do that, AJ, how you doing? Did you have any cool dreams you want to share with the public?
No, it was one of those I'm so tired naps that I closed my eyes and then I opened my eyes and it was just another time. And I didn't even feel like I really napped. It was just it was one of those. But I've been doing well. It was a busy Monday for sure. Obviously busy with a lot of sleeping, as you can tell. No, but I'm super excited for today's episode. I had an awesome weekend as well. Obviously
Me too. We hung out. We did some cool stuff.
Yeah. No, we had a great weekend. I got to catch up with a bunch of friends that I hadn't seen in some time, so that was cool. What about you, man?
Weekend was good, but it's funny. On the topic of napping and sleeping, I think this is a great segue into today's episode. Don't worry, we'll make this entertaining. But I am guilty of being sound asleep on this year's quarterback class. So as a reminder, for last year, because this is our second time around the Dynasty calendar, baby, we are starting off with rookie quarterback and tight end previews. We're going to do our top 5 players, a couple superlatives, a couple of questions at the end, mixing things up. Next week, we got wide receivers, the weekend after running backs, and then after that comes the NFL draft. So definitely stay tuned with us because this is where you're going to want to be to know about those sleepers, those busts, and how to differentiate between making those tough decisions after the one-on-one, which is Breece Hall. So for some context on this year's quarterback class, and AJ, please stop me when I sound biased or negative, or remember to plug our socials. Just follow me at Ben the Pylon Don, at AJ the Pylon Don, at Pylon Dons, at the Pylon Dons on Instagram, and shout out First Gaming on Twitter. But AJ, please seriously call me out if you think I'm being too harsh. But there's not really considered to be a quarterback worthy of the one-on-one in this year's NFL draft. And that is pretty much seeped into fantasy communities. Fantasy players aren't through the moon on these guys. They have their truthers. There's their Willis truthers, their Pickett truthers. But there isn't a lot of sure things in this class. Is that fair to say in your opinion?
You could argue there's not one. Nothing that you said is incorrect. And when you're
I'm happy that you liked what I said because that took so much willpower and that was the most politically correct intro to this quarterback class I possibly could have given.
I can imagine because I've heard you talk about this quarterback class off of the mic, and a lot of the times it ends up with these guys not being worthy of a top 15 pick instead of just the 101 in NFL drafts.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the tough thing for me with this quarterback class is I find it to be sneakily deep. I don't see a lot of tier drop-offs. And that's why I'm so interested this year in quarterbacks in the NFL draft that are going to be going in the second round or the third round, because I'm not positive that those guys at the top of the class, air quotations with us for those who are alongside on YouTube, please feel free to subscribe to Pylon Don's Fantasy Football as well. That's my last plug until the end of the show, I promise. But yeah, I don't think these top tier guys are really all that much better. I don't know if I'd rather have, from an NFL perspective, NFL only, I don't know if we look back a couple of years ago, remember when the Giants went Saquon and Willie Hernandez, and other teams were oh, well, you could have went Quentin Nelson, Nick Chubb, for example. I think if you made those types of swaps with quarterbacks and defensive players in this year's class, I think it could end up looking pretty similar. That waiting could be beneficial.
Yeah, some of the QBs we're going to discuss are definitely candidates to go pretty deep into day 2. So that's going to be really interesting because when you take a quarterback day 2, it's almost like when you're a quarterback prospect and you're not a guaranteed first round pick, it's okay, there's some significant fatal flaws. There are things that as a team we don't think you're capable of doing as a starter, but you do have these green flags that we do look for in an NFL quarterback prospect. So you get away from oh, this guy will be a future starter. When will he start? And more, will he start? Will he sit a year and improve, and will he get the keys to the offense from the head coach or maybe whatever veteran quarterback is there? So one or two or even three of these top five are potential day two picks, which is just a testament not only to how deep this class is at defensive end, secondary positions, offensive line, but also just how shallow and how flawed this quarterback class is, especially compared to last year. I mean, you look at Superflex drafts, Jamar Chase wasn't going inside the top three in a good amount of Superflex drafts. If Jamar Chase was in this draft, he would be the 101 far and away without question in all formats. So it's just a testament of how not only NFL scouts but dynasty players are viewing these QBs.
I will say the nice thing about this class is that none of these guys could ever be as bad as Kellen Mond. So that's really good news. But I guess let's just get into it right now. AJ, you and I were unanimous in our quarterback one from a fantasy perspective. Please remember, this is a fantasy football podcast. We have our own takes about what we think smart NFL teams do. But for fantasy, we're in lockstep with Malik Willis, the 101. What's your take on Malik Willis, and why do you have him there?
So when you're picking from a quarterback class that doesn't have your Trevor Lawrence, your Andrew Luck, even your Baker Mayfield or your Zach Wilsons, that those guys that are guaranteed to go 1, 2, or even 3, you then start to have to draft for upside. You can't go, okay, this guy was the number 1 pick. He's going to be a starter for X amount of years. You have to operate under the pretense that as a number 1 pick, he's going to hit. Willis won't go in the top 4, and I'm pretty comfortable saying that. So
he shouldn't go in the top 4. Should not.
No, and he should not. Absolutely. So when it comes to Malik Willis versus Kenny Pickett, who we both have at number 2, you just have to look at the two prospects and go, okay, I think personally Malik Willis can join that elite tier of Russian QBs right away in the right situation. I'm talking the tier of Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields even.
You're missing one.
Deshaun Watson.
No. Trey Lance.
All right. I was thinking of guys that have played more than like 15 minutes on an NFL field, but yeah, Trey Lance would definitely qualify in that tier as well, hopefully when he starts. But yeah, you just have to look at it like that. And if Konami QBs dominate the top of fantasy quarterback leaderboards, regardless of format, regardless of whether it's 6-point or 4-point, being able to have that rushing floor and that upside that you can tack on an extra 10 to 20 points on the ground on top of whatever you do in the air is just unprecedented. And that's not to say Pickett won't be able to do that. Willis just showed that he can do it on a weekly basis, finding the end zone in college. So why do you have Willis over Pickett? Because I know you were a little less convinced on it than I was coming into this show.
To be honest, and you know that I like to come onto the air gung-ho, ready to die on my hills, and I make my takes because I believe in my heart of hearts. I feel pretty lukewarm on this one. I have Malik Willis over Kenny Pickett because Malik Willis looks to be the plus rusher. Like, it's really something to see watching Malik Willis scramble, watching his burst leaving the pocket. That first step is so quick. He's that kind of runner. It's a little bit more Lamar Jackson, a little bit more Mike Vick than it would be a Trey Lance or Justin Fields as a rusher. Those guys are a little more Cam Newton-esque and a little more powerful and strong. And Malik Willis, he plants that right foot and he goes. The reason, however, while I'm hesitant, and this is a great segue into our number 2 quarterback, is all the great things that Kenny Pickett can do. And I think that Kenny Pickett is going to be the best pick for a quarterback for an NFL team this year. If I'm an NFL team and I need a quarterback, Kenny Pickett is the guy that I think my team should go after. I'm not obsessed with Kenny Pickett. He's kind of like Zach Wilson with Mac Jones' arm. Do with that what you will. He has great rushing upside. Pickett's crossbody throws and comfortable. He's comfortable rolling out, which is always great. He's very accurate, but he doesn't have a cannon. That thing with Zach Wilson is one of those guys who has an absolute rocket of an arm, can make every single throw on the field. Kenny Pickett has the body capability to escape and create those throws. However, the actual throw himself, you look on tape, a lot of his best deep balls, they're not these heaters where his best wide receiver can go up and just make a contested catch on the ball, and it's not in that perfect spot. It's more so Kenny Pickett plays to his strengths, and he knows his arm strength, and he looks for the open man. He escapes and finds the guy time and time again. And on those deeper balls, he tends to lead his receivers, which is, there's nothing wrong with having a receiver who's open. I don't want to penalize Kenny Pickett for it. I just want to talk a little bit about the arm strength. I think Kenny Pickett, my favorite thing about Pickett versus Willis, I think Pickett has potentially more staying power than Malik Willis, even regardless of draft capital, because I think Pickett's a safer bet to be a long-term NFL starter. And also, side note, if you watch Kenny Pickett's tape, it'll take about 3 minutes until the only person you're watching on the field is Jordan Addison, because that's what happened to me this morning. I was going back over some Kenny Pickett notes, and by the end of it, I was just like, holy crap, Jordan Addison. Because every single play they didn't even say Kenny Pickett. It was touchdown Jordan Addison. Touchdown. I counted like 5 in a row. But back on topic, that's my take on Kenny Pickett. AJ, how do you feel about what I just said? Are there things you see differently?
First of all, appreciate a good Jordan Addison shout out. If you watched the Pinstripe Bowl, Kenny Pickett opted out, obviously, because he had already declared for the NFL draft. And Jordan Addison proceeded to put on an 180 receiving yard clinic with a backup QB in a bowl game. It's just a testament to how amazing Jordan Addison was and how amazing he will be as a 2023 prospect. But I totally agree. Pickett is definitely, if there was betting odds on who would be the longest tenured starting quarterback in this class, Kenny Pickett would be your minus 180. He would be your favored guy for that, just because he is a little bit older than Malik Willis. He's a full year older. He'll be 24 coming into the NFL season. And that comes with a sense of maturity. I mean, he was a longtime player at Pitt. He won the ACC in his past season, and a lot of his tools just translate to being more of a game manager. Obviously, he is a mobile player, and he can extend plays quite a bit.
People love that fake slide, man.
Oh my God, that is a sick play. It's
a sick move, and he has that in his bag. Kenny Pickett's gonna bring that out this season.
He's no pushover in the open field, and that's the thing. But he definitely, I think, could, if he's taken to the right situation, slot in as a day one starter, more so than any of these guys in this class, and stay there. So yeah. I totally agree with that. I'm rooting for Kenny Pickett just because I really enjoyed watching him last year at Pitt. What he did for that program, them winning the ACC, even though we are Syracuse fans, was wildly impressive.
So yeah, Kenny Pickett was really, really good. I don't dislike Kenny Pickett. I'm not specifically rooting for Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett exists to me, and I'm sure he will keep existing in my circle for a really long time. Let's take it to the quarterback 3, AJ, where this is our first disagreement, and we have these guys flip-flopped because we both have Sam Howell entrenched at the quarterback 4, right where he belongs, but we see our quarterbacks 3 and 5 a little bit differently. So before I get to my guy, would you please tell me why you have Desmond Ridder as your quarterback 3, and then I can refute that later on. I'll talk about my guy at 3, and we can touch upon the disagreements later.
So as the second youngest QB of the top 5, we're discussing the youngest being true junior Sam Howell. Desmond Ridder was a 4-year starter for a D1 program, and he led this program to their best season quite literally ever. And the year before was their second best season ever as a program. And this is a place where, trust me, there's not a ton of guys that come out of here. But, I mean, Ahmad Gardner is a projected top 10 pick. Travis Kelce is a Cincinnati alum. That's about all the Cincinnati NFL trivia you're going to be getting from me. But Desmond Ridder has been shooting up draft boards for good reason. His pro day, he looked absolutely outstanding. And he's not the same athlete that Malik Willis is. But Malik Willis didn't run the 40, and Desmond Ridder did. And Desmond Ridder ran a damn good 40. I want to say it was a 4.63.
It was faster. It was a 4.5 something. I checked it today.
All right. Well, thank you. But
No, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you continue. You keep going. You have fun with your
but
Desmond Ritter.
but again, when you're looking at a quarterback class that has its flaws and has its guys that may need time, from a fantasy perspective, you instantly have to swing for the upside because I'm not going to be caught drafting a Matt Corral or a Sam Howell that may have to sit some time. Matt Corral more so for the injury and less for his capability as a quarterback. Um, if I'm taking a guy that I think is going to have to sit, he needs to have rushing upside. He needs to be on a team that I think could really turn things around in a pretty short window. I am actually mocking Desmond Ritter to the Detroit Lions, and I think they are a team that could really turn it around. I think Jared Goff doesn't get enough credit for what he did with that team last year because on paper they were probably a bottom two team and they were really competitive to end the stretch. They're likely going to bring in a weapon in this class as well, whether that be with their second round pick, whether that be at 32. But that is where I'm projecting they draft Ritter. And I just can't sit here in full confidence and us bash this QB class as a whole and then tell people to take the safer option in a class we don't even really like compared to previous years. That's my big kicker. And he's been climbing up draft boards. I saw him.
He has been climbing up draft boards.
Pittsburgh to 20,
yes,
which was pretty wild. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think if you give a guy like Ritter a year to sit behind somebody, he was a phenomenal leader for the Cincinnati Bearcats. And I mean, I'm rooting for him super hard. So yeah, I've got him at number 3 right now.
So I'll give my thoughts on Ritter in a little bit because we're going to keep it positive for me. I've been pretty outspoken negatively about this quarterback class. However, somehow, some way, Matt Corral has squeaked his way into a little soft spot in my heart. More so from an NFL perspective, followed by a super flex. And in a one quarterback league, I'm honestly not too interested in him, just being totally transparent, but I do like the guy. I think my favorite thing with Matt Corral outside of his personality, because that guy just lives and breathes football. The passion is evident when he's on the field. He plays with some serious cojones. He's everything I love about Drew Lock with none of the determined failure yet. So I'm certainly a little hopeful. Absolutely. But a couple of things to note. Corral did play in the best conference of all of these guys, playing at Ole Miss, most competitive, which I really liked as well. Additionally, he added an extra 60 pass attempts from his 2020 season to his 2021 season, and he cut back by 9 interceptions despite passing the ball more, which just displays really great ball security for a team that has put out – Ole Miss has put out tons of NFL talent. They've put out A.J. Brown. They've put out DK Metcalf. They've put out Elijah Moore. They are putting out these guys, and Matt Corral has been really good. So I trust Ole Miss as a program. He's been strong there. Full transparency, my faith in him is more so rooted in my belief he can hold down an NFL job than him having amazing fantasy tools like a Willis type. But he also has some really crafty feet along the goal line, or at least he did before he got injured. He added 11 rushing touchdowns on the ground last season. So I'm just really excited by a young player who plays with a lot of passion, continues to improve, and comes from a strong program.
So Desmond Ritter also does a great job. Sorry, because I can go on and on.
We want to talk about Sam Howell right now. We'll talk about how he was pretty good, lost a lot of weapons. Now he wasn't great, but it's sick that he's a true junior. And we can just say all that, and then we can go into our pretty much Corral Ritter debate, because that's our really only. Do you have other things you want to add to Sam Howell, who I sneakily like, because you did mention the only true junior in the class?
Yeah, the only true junior in the class, the youngest quarterback in the class, projected top pick a year prior. He threw for 9.2 yards per attempt through his career with 92 touchdowns to 23 interceptions. So he was
850 yards on the ground.
Yeah, he was slinging it. He has some decent ability to scramble. There's not really any huge red flags for Howell, but he pretty much poses very minimal upside. At least that's what a lot of teams are portraying with how they're valuing him right now. I think Sam Howell is a major candidate to be drafted to a pretty good team with a good veteran that can afford to take a guy like Howell to sit a year and then give him the keys. Specifically, I think the Indianapolis Colts and Sam Howell is a match made in heaven. The Colts bringing in Matt Ryan this offseason. I think you bring in a guy like Howell. Because the rest of that QB room, I mean, Sam Ellinger's it's a cool story that he was some scrambling guy at Texas, and now he's in the QB room there. But they need a true franchise quarterback because Matt Ryan is their 5th quarterback in 5 years. So I think if Howell goes to them or to another veteran team where he can afford to sit a year, he could seriously have some upside and see a serious jump in value. So in one quarterback leagues in the 3rd round, I'm really going to be looking at Sam Howell. In Superflex,
I'd say the late 3rd round as well, just to make that clear. I agree with you that Sam Howell's really has a lot of upside, and I like how he's young. And I think I'd prefer if he sat. But I think that underratedly, this class is really deep. I just wanted to make that distinction for that 3rd round, especially in single quarterback. I'd love to get Sam Howell on my taxi squad in the 2nd round of a Superflex league, though. That's speaking my language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I hear you.
So are we ready to mix it up about Matt Corral and Desmond Ridder? Because you've asked me about Ridder a couple times now. You've been waiting for this because, like you said, Ridder can scramble.
It's not that he can scramble. It's that he can outrun NFL linebackers and NFL defensive edges and go toe-to-toe downfield, arguably with some safeties as well. This is not 4.78 speed and crafty eyes down the field like Dak Prescott. This is an athlete. He's not too far behind Willis as an athlete. He's got more snaps under center than Malik Willis. He's got a lot going for him. He's got a production profile that has improved every single year as a starter. Even after junior year, people thought he should declare for the NFL draft, go in the 2nd round, take what he can get. He returned and he threw for 30 touchdowns for the Cincinnati Bearcats. There's a reason the NFL scouts are starting to turn their heads, and there's a reason he's creeping into the back end of the 1st round. I think he's got the potential to have a crazy return on value, similarly to Jalen Hurts.
So all of those things are true, and I think that with these 2 quarterbacks, these are things that you and I just see differently. So nothing, what I'm about to say, you may not agree with, but I'm hoping you'll respect my reasoning. I've seen him shooting up draft boards, and I see these reasons why. I know you like him. I know he tested really well at the combine. He ran that 4.5, but a lot of guys test well at the combine. Zamir White ran a sub 4.5 at the running back position, and we haven't moved him up an inch. Additionally, statistically, he wasn't as good a rusher as Corral or Sam Howell, doing a lot less with his legs in terms of yards or touchdowns as well. I know the capability, but the production still matters. And I'm honestly at the point where I kind of view Desmond Ridder as a bit of a tweener, where, sure, he's a better runner athletically than Corral or Howell, but it didn't show up in the box score. And I don't think he's as good of a passer as Pickett or, for that matter, Corral or Willis. So for me, I have him as this pretty athletic, decent passer. And I think it's great that Cincinnati improved, and I certainly attribute a ton of that to his leadership and play. But that defense was also really, really strong, and he had support. So for me, I just really don't see a ton of – I see the upside because it feels like everything is possible. He can run, he can throw. But I'm viewing it as maybe a glass half empty where he can kind of run and he can kind of throw. So I'm just not enamored. And I went back and rewatched more tape this morning before we hopped on the mic because I wanted to know and just feel fresh with what I was talking about. And I didn't see that 4.5 speed on tape. I saw, honestly, more of the Cam Newton, Justin Fields style rusher than that Malik Willis style rusher, which there's nothing wrong with. Cam Newton, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Josh Allen, for that matter, those powerful bully runners are great. But if we're talking about a guy in his 4.5 speed, those bully runners don't have 4.5 speed. That's not what I was seeing. So for me, I just honestly feel like Howell's a better upside play, and I feel like Corral is safer. So that's my reasoning for Ridder at 5.
Yeah, I think with these QBs, I'm just going to have to swing for the fences because I'm not comfortable. Then this is more so coming from a super flex perspective. I'm just not going to leave the first round with a guy who I think might be Andy Dalton when I could leave in the first round with a guy who I believe has top 10 upside, but could absolutely fall flat on his face. In Superflex, that's the type of risk that I would be willing to make, because if it does hit, the return on value you get is just insurmountable. You're talking multiple firsts, you're talking top end flex talent at the receiver and running back position. And Desmond Ritter, it's not like he's like a crafty runner. This dude is 6'4", 220 pounds. Like, he is a big runner. He doesn't run in the same style as Malik Willis. He's a different type of athlete. And I'm glad you brought that up, because Matt Corral is not really standing huge and tall, and he's coming off an injury. Does the injury scare you at all? Because it's scaring me quite a bit.
This could be something that we look back on in a couple months and I may need to backtrack off of, but I'll let NFL teams decide if they care about the injury or not. If they're confident, if I see Matt Corral go at 32 to Detroit, which is where I currently have him, which is exactly where you have Ritter, which is pretty funny, actually. We're pretty much in lockstep at the quarterback position, minus these two guys. I won't be super phased. If I see Matt Corral falling around 3, then I could be sweating that, and I would probably need to change my stance. Before we wrap up quarterback, we have 2 more segments on it. We have landing spots and sleepers. What do you want to start with, AJ?
Let's go through landing spots first real quick. We both have Willis projected to go to Carolina at 6. We both have Kenny Pickett projected to go to the New Orleans Saints. Whether that be them trading up or him sliding to them.
Going at 32.
We both have a quarterback going at 32. I have Ritter. You have Corral. We both have Howell going in the second round to teams with vets. I have him going to Indy. You have him going to Tampa Bay at 60.
Sorry, Kyle Trask Truthers. My bad.
And you have Desmond Ritter going to Pittsburgh, and I've got Matt Corral going to Washington.
So I don't agree with Ritter to Pittsburgh, but it's what I think is going to happen. I've been hearing the noise just like you've been, and like underratedly, and people don't want to hear this. If Pittsburgh takes a wide receiver, I pretty much assume he's the next chosen one. But outside of Ben Roethlisberger, a very long time ago, Pittsburgh hasn't been an organization that's developed many of their quarterbacks very well. Mason Rudolph, correct me if I'm wrong, was a top 100 pick. I couldn't even tell you who else they've been picking up over the years, but they're not like a
Joshua
team.
Dobbs out of Tennessee was a third round pick. He did not pan out.
Yeah, and it's just I feel like there's been an inability to develop these young quarterbacks from Pittsburgh, but I think that there's some serious potential for Ritter to go there. So
that's a great call. That's a great call,
you.
By the way.
And can you tell me about Skylar Thompson and why he's your favorite sleeper quarterback?
Well, this quarterback class leaves much to be desired. Skylar Thompson was a pretty highly touted recruit coming into Kansas State, got snaps under center early in his career, had some decent production at the end of his sophomore year, and at the start of his junior year, he started off quite hot. He ended that season injured, and then he had again got injured as a senior. But the thing about Skylar Thompson was he's got a pretty good arm. He makes pretty good reads. He's pretty mistake averse. And he was able to extend plays with his leg. So if you're looking for like the bottom of like the blockbuster great value bin version of like Kenny Pickett and Sam Howell, this is your guy right here. Like could sneak on in like a Kyle Allen-esque way. And you're like, wow, he was the QB 26 when a bunch of people got hurt. And I had him on my taxi squad, and in Superflex, I got to plug him in for 5 weeks. That has value, and I think he can bring that type of value. So I'm totally fine spending. I mean, when I'm talking about this quarterback class, after this 5, it's like late thirds, early fourths, and a couple hundred.
Pretty much even in Superflex as well,
even
right?
In Superflex, absolutely. I mean, Bailey Zapp is likely the 6th quarterback off the board to consensus. But after that, you're totally just throwing all these guys to the wolves. Nobody's really set themselves apart from this cluster of pretty underwhelming prospects.
So That was some interesting takes about Skylar Thompson. I'm sure maybe he has a long NFL career. But was he the back-to-back Black College Football Player of the Year? I don't think so, because Akil Glass was at 6'5", 215 pounds. His senior year, he just went for 3,500 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 7 picks. Like I said, he plays at Alabama A&M and HBCU, which doesn't have a ton of notoriety, but he has great production, great accolades, and great size. Some of these really talented guys have started to go more the HBCU route, which is an awesome program and something that they're really passionate about. We're yet to see a ton of guys make that jump at the NFL level because currently it's just not the same level of competition. But I'm hoping to see Akil Glass go before round 5 and be one of the first people to break down that barrier. So he's someone I'm rooting for. I actually first heard of him from Player Profiler because, like many of us, there's not a lot of prospects coming out of that HBCU pipeline, but maybe Akil Glass can be the first.
That would be awesome, man. I'm definitely going to be rooting for him as well. That concludes our QB section for today. We're going to get into the tight ends, and our top 4 is the exact same. You've just got the guy I've got at 4 up all the way at 2, which I was not ready for. I didn't even look at that until just now. But let's get right into it. I'm just going to talk about Trey McBride for like 45 seconds, and then we keep it pushing.
We can absolutely keep that pushing. Yeah.
Okay. McBride almost accounted for 40% of his team's receptions, over 40% of his team's receiving yards. The only red flag is that he had 1 touchdown last year and has a pretty low career touchdown rate of 6.1%. But this guy doesn't really drop anything. He was used in so many situations. He caught a lot of balls behind the line of scrimmage. He's not necessarily the deep threat that some of these hyper crazy athletes that we're about to discuss were for their programs. But he led this group of position players in yards after the catch per reception of 7 yards. So he's got a little bit of wiggle. He's not necessarily Kyle Pitts, but he gives me like major Dalton Schultz, Dawson Knox, Dallas Goedert vibes. And that's really good in the second round. And I think he's going to get higher DC than people think. And I think you're going to start to see him climb up rookie boards in the coming weeks once we realize, these teams in the back half of the second round, some of these teams with more complete rosters are going to go, wait, why don't we just take a guy like McBride who showed he can handle volume, who showed he can really never drop the ball. He's a safe, talented receiver, and I think his draft capital is going to reflect that.
Yeah, ditto AJ. I'm not going to say another word. I'm just going to ask one more follow-up question. We're going to go lightning style. Trey McBride or Pat Freiermuth in Dynasty?
Pat Freiermuth.
As rookie prospects. Take Pittsburgh out of it.
McBride.
Okay.
By a hair. But I was also below consensus on Freiermuth, and that was wrong last year. I actually had Brevin Jordan just a hair above him.
I'm not mad at you for that. I like Brevin Jordan.
No, that was when their draft capital was projected to be neck and neck, and before Brevin Jordan fell all the way to the 5th round inexplicably.
Wrongfully so, mind you. Wrongfully so.
Yeah, totally agree.
So just to keep a little bit of back and forth going, I'm going to take it to my tight end too, who you have later, and I got to talk about Jelani Woods. And I'll admit that this could have been a 2A, 2B, but no one likes that. Get off the fence. Jelani Woods is my tight end too. I have him over Isaiah Likely, who we'll get to in a couple. And I kind of need to talk about both to explain my thought process. So Likely has the production profile, whereas Jelani Woods is a combination of athletic freakishness in a better conference and better competition. That's what did it for me. Tight ends aren't 6'7" and run 4.6s. How you were saying Trey McBride is not a Kyle Pitts type. Don't get me wrong. Jelani Woods will not be a first round or second round dynasty pick anytime soon in startup leagues. But if you want to talk about a guy who has a little bit of unicorn to him, gives me a little bit of Darren Waller vibes, a guy who doesn't need to jump that high to have a crazy catch radius, Jelani Woods makes it easy. He looks unbelievable on tape. He looked even better at the combine. He's shooting up draft boards, and I think he's just an absolute freak. I think having McBride above him is a no-brainer, but I think that comes down to the production profile. I think I'd rather have Jelani Woods in the third round of a rookie draft than Trey McBride in the early half of the second round. If I could have like Jelani Woods at 30 or Trey McBride at 13, probably would take Woods at 30. If it's like McBride at like 20 and Woods at 30, I'd rather have McBride.
Yeah, so when you're looking in the later rounds, and this doesn't only apply to fantasy, this applies to the way NFL teams have been drafting the tight end position in recent memory. You go get these matchup nightmares. Average yards per pass attempt, yada, yada, yada. You go get the biggest matchup nightmare you can find if they're not an elite tight end prospect. And so Jelani Woods is every bit the matchup nightmare you could imagine. He was in the wide receiver room at Oklahoma State. Being 6'7" and 260 pounds, it's pretty hard to scheme for that guy on the outside. So they moved him over to the tight end. He transferred to Virginia. My concern is that he's going to be turning 24 years old after his rookie season, and he's new to the position, and this is a position that takes time. So if you're taking a guy like Jelani Woods, you might not be seeing much out of him until he's 27 years old.
100%.
And that's fine. And that's fine. And that's fine when you're drafting in the third round. So I don't hate this. But you've got Isaiah Likely sitting here at 21 years old. He will be turning 22 during his rookie year. He has an insanely strong production profile. He accounted for over 25% of his team's receptions and over 35% of his team's receiving touchdowns. Most yards per pass attempt on his entire team. He doesn't really have a profile against Power 5 opponents. That's just the nature of him playing against or playing for Coastal Carolina. My apologies. But this is the type of guy that just like statistically 6'4", 250, ran under a 4.7.
Has bunnies also. Bunnies.
Gets way up.
And they stay on tape too, and he had the highest vert at the combine. I told you this was hard for me. I didn't do this one lightly.
Yeah. I thought you made a likely pun there, and then I realized you said lightly.
That's totally fair because that's absolutely something I would do. So, like, I don't deserve that benefit of the doubt. But no, I did not. I would have.
But yeah, Isaiah Likely is pretty cemented as my tight end too. The big thing for me was he gained 43% of his yards as an isolated receiver. So he was getting schemed. He was getting routes drawn up for him where he was getting to use that mismatch potential that he provides, and he was doing it consistently, and he was doing it for a large portion of his yardage. He's not an amazing blocker, and that's going to keep him off the field. But when you're looking at guys that are all going to be going potentially day 3, you have to take the guy. I mean, all these guys that we're talking about right now are matchup nightmares. I'm just going to opt for the one with the strongest production profile rather than the one with the biggest matchup upside.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, this is a preference thing. Like, Isaiah Likely is really, really good. I decided I wanted the guy who was 3 inches taller. And that some NFL scouts will agree and some will disagree. It's all about what you think. We're just
and again, I can't blame you for it. Let's talk about the guy we have right below Isaiah Likely. And in consensus, I think we're both pretty in on him. At ADP, I think he's a slam dunk. Our boy Drew is definitely a little higher than we are.
Drew definitely deserves a shout out on this one. Drew put me on. Shout out to the roomie. He put me on to Greg Dulcich out of UCLA. So their best tight end since Devin UCSC. So coming from a really strong tight end U. But all jokes aside, Dulcich is great. He's been a consistent riser. Getting more NFL notoriety. UCLA is a strong NFL program. And my favorite thing about him is he came in as a freshman at 208 pounds soaking wet. He's bulked up to 250. And upon revisiting his tape, he's a great deep ball tracker and sprints past linebackers. tight end's tough because a lot of good tight ends come out, and the NFL doesn't feature a lot of good tight ends. But I think Greg Dulcich is as good a dart thrower as anybody.
So I'm going to talk about his deep ball ability because I think he absolutely smacks Trey McBride in this one category. And I think Trey McBride has him beat pretty much everywhere, but I think he is far and away. And this is a really, really, really hot take that's going to bite me in the butt if this guy doesn't hit. I think he's one of the 5 best deep ball receiving players in this draft class.
And that is an AJ Carry-On trademark take that has
I'm gonna stick to it.
I respect it.
He had the highest yards per reception of the tight ends in this class. 55% of his targets came on throws over 10 yards downfield. To put in perspective, UCLA is not a field stretching offense. This was the Zach Charbonnet show with a whole lot of screens, and then Greg Dulcich was their primary guy down the field. That 55% rate was 4th overall amongst all the pass catchers in this entire draft. I believe the only people above him were Jalen Tolbert, Alec Pierce of Cincinnati, and one receiver that I'm totally blanking on that's going to hit me as soon as I end this recording. But yeah, being 4th overall in this draft class on deep targets is really something that I can't ignore. That was a big thing for why I value Brevin Jordan so highly. And despite the lower draft capital, he has proven to be quite the return on investment. So I think Greg Dulcich can do something similarly. I think it's going to take him some time just because, again, he is also not the best blocker. But he ran under a 4.7 at 6'4", 250 pounds. Really knows how to play the seam, not only from a speed perspective, but from an awareness perspective. When I'm watching Greg Dulcich, he's breaking cover 2, he's breaking cover 3, he's breaking cover 6, he's breaking cover 4, and he's doing it all in the same area of the field, which isn't just a physical attribute. That's really aware. It's monitoring where your quarterback's eyes are going. So all in all, I really think Dulcich could totally miss, or he could totally be far and away the biggest value of this tight end rank of.
Yeah, he's like I said, he's a really strong dart throw. My tight end 5 is Jeremy Ruckert, 6'5", 250, high level recruit. He has really strong vision as a runner out of Ohio State. They don't traditionally feature the tight end, which is frustrating for a guy who's supposed to be as talented as Ruckert, but the production just isn't there. Ruckert really can do it all. He can block well. He has great hands. He's really talented. It's unlikely he's an elite locked and loaded guy. He reminds me a little bit of Hunter Long without the feature role. All the tools are there. There's nothing Jeremy Ruckert can't do. The question is, will he get an opportunity to do them? And that's why he's my tight end 5, who's probably more of a 4th round pick than a 3rd round pick.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Charlie Kohler as my tight end 5. It was between him, Ruckert, and Jalen Weidermeyer. This was, again, strictly off of production profile. He's entering this draft class, leading this class in career receptions and yards from the tight end position. And he had 23 touchdowns over his 4-year career. He wasn't an early declare. He's going to be 23 years old. But this dude was a contested catch monster. He ranked 1st in the class in contested catch conversion at Iowa State. And I'm willing to take a shot on a program that has produced solid players. And it would have been a lot better if he went to Iowa and not Iowa State, because I could compare him to the slew of fantastic tight ends that have come out of there. But Iowa is no pushover either. A lot of Charlie Kohler's plays, they end in first downs or they end in touchdowns. And that's always something that catches my eye. I think the number, I saw this somewhere and it's gonna bother me, but it was very close to 50% of his catches that finished in a first down or touchdown. It was 40 something point something. It was like high 40%, which is really impressive. So he's not as much of a matchup nightmare as Jeremy Ruckert by any means, but the production profile is really interesting. Could he slot in to a crowded tight end room and make some noise and possibly ruffle some feathers? I totally think so.
Yeah, absolutely. So AJ, before we wrap up today, we've been doing a little bit of trying to not come off as overly in love with this quarterback and tight end class, because frankly, we're not. Of course, there's some guys with upside that we've touched upon, but in the grand scheme of things, at what point in the in single quarterback rookie drafts are you going to start looking into the quarterback and tight end position?
I am very comfortable starting to look at Trey McBride starting at, say, the 204 or the 205 in one quarterback.
So 204 for math would be pick 16 on a big board, for example.
Yeah, I would say as soon as the top 15 is done, I would take Trey McBride in single quarterback formats before any of the quarterbacks.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. I'm staring at my updated big board, which I actually sent to you while you were napping. It's not ready for the public because it is. I edit this daily. This is how I'm feeling on April 11th when I'm recording. But for me, I really like the top-heavy talent in this wide receiver class, and I love the depth at running back. And I personally wouldn't be looking into Trey McBride till probably closer to like the 208. Personally. And I have Malik Willis a couple spots after, which I know is controversial. I know they're teaming with upside, but just like, and we're doing a wide receiver show, and we may need to do like a two-parter running back show because I think Abram Smith deserves like a 20-minute feature on his own, but that's just me. But like, for example, I would take Trey McBride before Abram Smith when we get there, but I don't think I would take Trey McBride before Dameon Pierce. I don't think I could take him before John Mechie. I think that those guys are guys who just have so much potential at positions that are more important in single quarterback settings.
Yeah, but on the flip side, positional scarcity is something that is pretty important. And if you can get a weekly starter at the tight end position in the second round, I mean, ask anybody who took Pat Freiermuth last year how they feel about that pick. And I bet they wish they had taken him sooner because he's not a locked and loaded tight end one for redraft this year. But for Dynasty, to have a guy at that age that you know is capable of being a multiple year top 10 option, it's a comforting feeling, and you can find guys for the cheap that can fulfill similar roles at the wide receiver and running back position. It's not as easy at tight end.
So are you a little bit more in lockstep with me on Willis and the quarterbacks in this class and in single quarterback formats?
Absolutely. Yeah.
For me, I have Malik Willis like as the 301, just straight up.
Yeah, I've got him as the 210, so I don't think we're that far off from each other.
The main premise is that
we had Fields and Lance as like 205, 206 in last year's draft. So we can't have Malik Willis there because I would rather have both of those guys. So
100%. It's not close for me either.
It's not.
So that was our diving into of the rookie quarterbacks and tight ends. We hope you found this helpful. I think the wide receivers, there's going to be a little bit more outtakes, a little more noise, because I got to tell you, I'm already halfway done with my show sheet for next week, and I'm foaming at the mouth, AJ. We could keep recording right now. I'm ready to rumble, but we're not going to. AJ, do you have any final thoughts before we jump off?
As always, thank you guys for tuning in. Big shout out to Verse Gaming. Make sure you guys go check out what they're doing. Not only on Twitter, but on TikTok. Their TikTok has been doing phenomenal lately. So Verse Gaming on TikTok. Make sure you go check them out. As always, check out at AJ the Pylon Don, myself, my fantastic co-host Ben at Ben the Pylon Don on Twitter, and our combined show Twitter at Pylon Dons. On Instagram, you can find us at the Pylon Dons. Quick little plug. I just wanted to say, phenomenal job with that Akil Glass shout. I'm going to be rooting for him.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. And just a reminder, if you subscribe to our podcast or YouTube channel, please make sure that when you listen next week, that you have some whole milk on hand, because it's going to get hot. I'm Ben Weiner.
I'm
He's AJ Carry On. Take it easy.